What went wrong with politics in America? Sells better and is easier to generate. You can get outraged by anything at all. Your neighbor has cute kittens. Now you can get outraged because you have no kittens or because the neighbor thinks his kittens are cuter than yours. How dare he claim he has cuter kittens? You know who does that? Pedophiles and child rapists. Why are you not outraged about the fact that your neighbor is a pedophile and a child rapist? How does this not upset you? This is true, hence the upvote, but I do personally believe it's disingenuous whataboutism to pretend Fox News isn't particularly more dangerous or legacied in its propaganda than most other outlets. It doesn't change the fact that other outlets also manipulate, or that people like Chris Cuomo or Jake Tapper are not newsmen in the mold of a Cronkite etc. But we also don't have to pretend Fox/Tucker Carlson et al. Are operating from the same baseline of disinformation as everyone else. Again, all sources are flawed. That's why news has to be consumed on aggregate. You need to read/watch/absorb NBC as WSJ as NYT as BBC as Al Jazeera English as WAPO as ABC etc. etc. But this is Fox/Tucker, just this week, spreading ludicrous vaccine misinformation. Which is particularly more toxic than bias degree of those other outlets. No, it isn't. They both push for illegal wars and social outrage, and I would argue CNN is worse for it, because they present themselves as more moderate, while spreading hate and anger all the same. But really, it's not about who's worse, they're all terrible, they're all a plague on society. This includes the rest of the world. BBC, Reuters, RT, and the rest. All of them. The same goes for political parties. All of them. /r/hall up lumping them all together is simply not accurate and it implies that they all lie, so why believe anything you hear? Most news outlets report mostly facts. Yes, they skew which facts to report but not all to the same degree. And if you consume a variety of sources you absolutely can pull together an accurate and effectively unbiased picture of the truth. First, the formation of political parties, followed by generations of the lesser of evils voting mentality. The Founding Fathers warned of the dangers of political parties, but we didn't listen. Then year after year, generation after generation of voting for the lesser of evils gave us options progressively further and further to the extreme ends of the spectrum. Imagine how much better our choices for POTUS would be if there were 6 candidates on the debate stage every 4 years rather than just 2. While Washington saw the perils of political parties, popular history likes to gloss over just how disunited the Founding Fathers were in their political stances. Even then, the northern and southern colonies had wildly different political and economic situations that were sidelined to get the Constitution ratified. The Federalists and Anti-Federalists were constantly at each other's throats, and those Hamilton vs. Jefferson coalitions quickly polarized the new government. Who would have thought that a bunch of academic revolutionaries would be a feisty bunch, the after effects of which are still felt to this day? Also think that Washington's feelings on political parties were strongly influenced by the way he was treated while he was president. The opposition media at the time really acted how Fox and CNN act today. Everything he did was attributed to some nefarious purpose. He was either evil, incompetent, or both. Having just led the army that actually secured the colonies their status as an independent nation, he was vexed. Quite vexed. And that isn't meant to distract from his point, but more to show that the things he was worried about are the exact things happening today, and yesterday, and last year, etc. And all of those areas are needed to keep this a great country. They're not. The most commonly used argument is that flyover states grow all the food, but when you break it down it's mostly soy, that gets exported or used for cattle feed, or corn, that's used for ethanol or HFCS, which objectively sucks. The entirety of the middle of the US could fuck right off and be their own little theocracy, and the rest of us would be far, far better for it. Apathy, lack of emotional intelligence, and identity. People's attachment to one party or belief as part of their identity. Once something becomes part of how someone views and defines themselves, it's almost impossible for them to change and learn new things, because that would rock the core of who they are. I'm a semi-moderate Dem with a handful of right-leaning views. But I acknowledge weaknesses of my side and think the right makes a handful of good points. But some people think, okay, I'm a Democrat or Republican, now I have to toe the line of the party, and it shapes how they view other issues. A good way to practice this is by not telling people who said something or what wide introduced legislation until after they voice their opinion on it. Example, you ask, hey, this bill was proposed, what do you think about it? You'll get a different answer if you say, hey, this Dem proposed / this Republican proposed. Like a sports home team. It takes emotional intelligence to be able to buck your own party sometimes and have independent views. Most people don't have that level of emotional intelligence, plus like 90% of Americans don't pay attention frequently enough to have an informed view on things. Oh, and many people no longer understand how to get credible information. I agree, but I think the biggest problem is the media. They're not in the business of informing the public anymore. I saw an old 60 Minutes video with Mike Wallace about the swine flu of 1976. And he was talking to a woman who was hurt by a vaccine the government was telling people they needed to take. That would not happen today. They have become more like propagandists than journalists. They are not the gatekeepers anymore. The systematic dismantling of the education system lead to ignorant and easily mislead voters. Democracy only works with an informed populace. Instead we have a bunch of racist dumbasses who are too stupid to realize they are voting against their own best interests. I mean, honestly, why else is the guy who never made over $50,000 a year getting worked up about more taxes on someone making $5 million a year? It's like they enjoy abusing the system but get mad when anyone less well off does it. Social media leading to the my ignorance is at least equal to your knowledge mentality. Egged on, of course, by the oligarchs who can't believe their luck at getting people to fight each other instead of effectively organizing against them. This is hardly unique to the states of America. First past the post voting practically guarantees that a two-party system will form, and many voters will align themselves behind one of the parties, not because they necessarily agree with all of the positions, but because they disagree more with the opposing party. The back and forth of two teams naturally leads to rivalries, people desiring revenge for the previous time the opposition was in charge, and less tolerance for intra-party dissension. Add to this an era where misinformation and outright lies can spread across the country in seconds, combined with social media networks designed to be addictive, One addictive trait being outrage, networks ready for clever manipulators to abuse, and I find it sort of surprising things are going as well as they are. Political leadership is a thankless job that doesn't pay enough salary. The benefit is the ability to leverage your power to create personal gain via legislation and pork barrel contracts. So the positions only attract those who can work without being directly compensated by salary. That puts a small demographic into power, time and time again. Political leadership is a thankless job that doesn't pay enough salary. Sounds like jury duty, which I recently mused would be an interesting way of appointing public officials. Just call up random people and say, "Fred, you're going to be mayor for the next 4 years. We'll pay you enough to barely survive, but just think of the civic pride you'll get." That is one example out of over 200 years of peaceful transfers of power for the presidency. What happened was sedition. Inexcusable. It shows the fragility of running and maintaining a republic. Transferring executive power is one of the weak points in the U.S. Constitution. Not every conservative in the country was on board with such treasonous actions. Loyalty is to the U.S. Constitution. Trump swore that oath and messed up big time. By the way, Congress can still take action against him to ban him from the presidency. See, now I'm not really sure what point you're going for here. You said the system was running fine since people were using words and money rather than violence. But, they are indeed trying to use violence. That would seem to indicate that the system is not working fine, wouldn't it? Just seems like pretending everything's good when it clearly isn't is a bit short-sighted. We've always held outlaws up as heroes, from Billy the Kid to Bonnie and Clyde to Al Capone. Popular culture has celebrated stupidity for a long time. The Republican Party has used some version of government is bad / wasteful / incompetent as its mantra for decades. This has metastasized into literal insurrection. Social media allows fringe beliefs, conspiracies, and prejudices to grow and fester. The Tea Party effected a reversal of conservative and liberal roles. Liberals used to be astrology-believing hippies healing themselves with crystals, while conservatives were supply-side intellectuals who cared more about science and industry than the environment. Conservatives are now the tinfoil hat-wearing prepper white supremacists who believe every pseudoscience conspiracy, and liberals are the defenders of science and democracy. Bill Clinton proved that scandals need not end a political career and that you can just ride out turmoil and survive. Newt Gingrich developed the scorched earth style of politics we see in Congress now. Does anybody look into the history of the candidates they support? Someone like Donald Trump hasn't done a good thing in his life. I don't know why one would come to the conclusion that he has your interests in mind. And I think in the end, that was shown to be the case. That he did not give a crap about his supporters. So in my opinion, a major factor is a lack of knowledge of how to evaluate a good candidate. We are too damn set on the whole us versus them mentally for the parties to even attempt to work together. Anytime one side puts forward a good idea, the opposing side has to reject it out of obligation, or else the other side wins. And it is not just the politicians but the voters too. A good example is a friend of mine. She identifies as one political party, despite the fact that she shares a lot of ideas and opinions of the opposing party. She is 45 years old. Since she was 18 she has voted the same as her parents have every single time she has ever voted. Never mind that honestly based on her personal beliefs she honestly should be voting for the other party, but she was raised that that party is wrong, they are idiots, they will doom us all, they are evil. A lot of voters chose political parties before they even understand the issue or idea of the party they are choosing. Only reason a lot of them go with the party they choose is because they are raised that way or because that is just how their area votes. Some eventually break away from this mentality and start thinking about the issues. Honestly, the best way we could even hope to attempt to fix our political system is to do away with the parties and people vote for candidates based on what the candidates actually say, instead of well this guy is an idiot but he is running as my political party so I have to vote for him so we don't lose. Everyone is so out of touch from our way of life. The way our country works is to make it seem that we're all the same thing, all the time. We aren't. We're just a bunch of stupid dummies who are as ignorant of how things work as they are of how they work. We need to change the system of government. Well, it's not exclusive to the USA, but the years of patriotic propaganda plus the regular amount of idiots in a nation created a variant of egocentric and narcissistic people who claims freedom every 5 seconds but won't respect anyone else's freedom. So that's a start. When you tell people that they have unlimited freedom and then they learn that's not true and then rage, and eventually get to power through democracy. Make enough people mad and then you can claim whatever you want under the flags of democracy and freedom. It's not a bug, it's a feature. Read your history. You think we are divided now? Try the 1850s on for size. Think politicians insult each other now? Thomas Jefferson called John Adams a hermaphrodite. Think politicians are cheats? Check out the 1880s. We are not anything special or awful now, and social media hasn't made us worse. It's just made us quicker to spread insults and fake news. The us is, for a while now, a bit of a fear culture. Fear the Japs. Fear the commies. Fear the hippies. That went well for a while when the big bad was someone else. Especially someone with a face. But right now, either political camp considers the other side to be the guys to fear. Though more so on the conservative side, I believe. That's it. Half the politicians consider the other half evil, and refuse to cooperate with them or take them seriously. I'm not sure if it's an act or genuine, but it does seem to be working out as a stay-in-power tactic. A big factor is our constitution and other rules around voting are just awful and incentivizes the worst behavior. First off, we have winner-take-all geographic districts, which incentivizes only two parties. These districts are still largely drawn by legislators in the various states, meaning gerrymandering is incredibly prevalent, meaning almost no politicians have to worry about losing. Second, we have a presidential system, which means that everyone thinks the president is in charge, but we actually have Congress in charge of laws. This means that in a split government scenario, the party controlling Congress has an incentive to be obstructionist. These structural incentives will dominate despite calls for compromise. Third, having a bicameral legislature makes the above worse, because an out party controlling one of the houses of Congress has the same incentive. Fourth, the filibuster is just insane, and no other government has what is effectively a supermajority requirement for routine legislation, but because American government used to entirely work because parties weren't as ideologically cohesive, and senators are nostalgic, we keep it around. Fifth, because laws are incredibly hard to pass for the above reasons and the Constitution is extremely hard to amend, the Supreme Court gets an absurd amount of power beyond what other Supreme Courts in other countries have. This makes it an incredible prize for an ideologically motivated party. 6. Because of urban/rural polarization, and the way most of these systems work is an advantage to rural areas, we are currently in a situation where one party can win with a minority of the votes, and entrench power in the Supreme Court, etc. This creates a lot of resentment among educated folks in cities. 7th, despite number 6, the urban side of the divide is culturally dominant. They are pretty much the workers that run corporations, and dominate professional and middle management jobs. They also have most of the spending money. This means that corporations, media, and universities all cater to those views, which creates resentment among the increasingly impoverished rural folks, which is of course tied up with racism as well. Friends, don't let friends write constitutions like the US.